Well, hello and welcome back to The Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we chronicle transcendent truth by traveling further up and further into the classic works of children's literature.
This is Season 9, Episode 4, The Conversation, which covers chapters 10 through 12 of The Princess and the Goblin.
Phil, I gotta say, before we dive into these chapters, I'm a little disappointed that... terrible way to start a podcast, by the way, saying I'm disappointed. But it's a little disappointed. We had your father on in the very last episode, and not once did you call him King Papa.
Papa.
Which is what Irene calls her own father here. In fact, the title of Chapter 9 is The Princess's King Papa, which does not really roll off the tongue.
It does not.
We then have Chapter 11, The Old Lady's Bedroom, and Chapter 12, a short chapter about Curdy.
Which was a very short chapter.
Very short.
You were talking about this in the last episode. Sometimes you read a really long one and then it's short. They kind of go all over the place.
Yeah, I'll say one of the honestly things, it's not a difficult thing when you're actually reading the book. One of the difficult things about podcasting about this book, which George MacDonald, be more thoughtful, man. What was he thinking? Here he is, 1872, not being mindful of what it'll be like for us trying to podcast about his book, 100 some years into the future. But so these chapters be, 2 pages long, then 15 pages long.
Yeah. Which honestly, I respect, because it feels like he is writing the story as if this is how it's actually happening. It feels very realistic, because real life events are not all the same length chapters.
I don't know. I've more of the mindset that this is like when streaming first came out, and I don't know if they still do this as much anymore. I don't see it as often, but you would watch a season of a TV show on Netflix. It's like, oh, this episode's 20 minutes long, and this episode is an hour and a half, and the next episode's 40 minutes long. And I had a hard time, like, wait, do I have time to watch this one or not? Whereas I like a good 22-minute sitcom. I know exactly how long it is. I love that Lewis with Narnia, I could anticipate about a 10-page chapter.
Right. It would take about 15 minutes to read.
Exactly.
You're going at a steady clip. Yeah.
But it does not at all take away from the joy I had reading these chapters. Phil, why don't we dive right into the summary that you've written?
This is for chapters 10 through 12. While playing, Irene hears a bugle sound, a sign that her father is coming to see her. After a meal, the king listens as his daughter tells him about her great old grandmother. When his majesty doesn't understand, Irene concludes that it must have all been a dream. On his way out, the king has a talk with Ludi that leaves her in tears. Later that fall, the princess awakens due to a pain in her thumb from pricking it on an old brooch, and begins to walk around, eventually finding her grandmother again. The old woman rubs an ointment on Irene's hand, healing it quickly. Elsewhere, Curdy continues working in the mines and investigating the cobs of the goblins. He uses a ball of string to find his way back, and each morning when he wakes up, he finds that his mother has sorted it all out for him again.
One of the things that your father mentioned in the last episode, and which I've seen in other places as I've been reading, is this idea that his characters are too good.
Mm-hmm.
They're just too wonderful. They're too virtuous. And this is something that is interesting for us as readers of many modern works where everything is nuanced, everything is morally gray. Again, I'm speaking hyperbolically. They're not everything is this way, but a lot of things really and truly are. Every bad guy has at least a understandable reason for being a bad guy.
And if he doesn't, he'll get one in the prequel.
And so it's interesting as we come across, really, I think all 3 of these chapters that we covered have an example of a character that is almost too good that it's boring. It's not, but almost. And we have that with the king, Irene's father. We see that with grandmother Irene, the woman in the top of the stairs. And we see that with Curdy's mother as well. That all of these characters are just virtuous human beings. And I think your dad said it this way in the last episode, and I've been sitting with it because I edited that episode not too long ago. And he said, he has a way of making goodness attractive and making it likable and making it exciting.
Yeah.
I don't know if he used those exact words, but something along those lines. And I've been really just kind of stewing in that, like thinking a lot about that idea in the way that, the King Papa, when he shows up, or in these conversations with grandmother, and even the very short chapter we get with Curdy's mom, who, again, I don't remember their last, Peterson, right? That's actually the last name, with Mrs. Peterson. All of these characters I find intriguing, and I'm enjoying my time with them, despite the fact that it actually wouldn't really be wrong to say they're one-dimensional. Maybe not grandmother, but the king certainly is one-dimensional in a way, and so is Mrs. Peterson.
I don't think she's Mrs. Peterson.
No, she's not?
I think Curdy is Peter's son.
It says here, Curdy spent many nights in the mine. This is the beginning of chapter 12. His father and he had taken Mrs. Peterson into the secret, for they knew mother could hold her tongue.
So his dad's name is Peter Peterson?
I didn't even think about that.
I don't know which one's worse.
I guess his dad is Peter Peterson. This is awesome. I love this. Things were just different in the Victorian age.
It was truly a different time.
So it's like they're overly good, but they have bad names.
You're right. Yeah.
Which is maybe why he went for a name like Curdy, which is a little odd for a name.
Yeah.
He's like, well, my name's the same name twice. So
What does it matter? We're still putting hydrogen in blimps.
why don't we go back to the beginning of chapter 10, and let's talk about this arrival of the princess's King Papa.
It looks like the illustration's really interesting too, because he's playing a horn, which I guess that was a bugle.
Sure, it is. What's interesting is you and I have different illustrations. Take a look at the one that I have on my Kindle here.
Oh, wow. That is very different.
Very different. Because the book is in public domain, you can just slap any illustration in there that you want. I did this because I have about 3 different versions of this on Kindle, just to kind of keep an eye out for any differences that I find. And each one of them, different illustrations, different illustrator.
Yeah.
So what happens at the beginning of this chapter, Phil?
We get a quick recap of everything that's been happening. The princess hasn't forgotten Curdy, but he hasn't been around a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And Irene's excited because she hears the sound of the bugle, which means her father's coming back. And he shows up shortly after and has a quick snack. There's a lot of attention paid to food. Yes. He has a snack, and then he asks his daughter what she's been up to, and she talks about her great-grandmother.
In this arrival, MacDonald has a few really interesting sentences that I wanted to take a look at here. And it's a little silly because MacDonald does something that writers often do, which is it's a little bit of a humble brag here. You know what the humble brag is, right?
I'm one of the best.
He starts a sentence here as he's describing the king arriving. And this is what he says. I wish I could describe the king so that you could see him in your mind. Okay, fair enough. Mm-hmm. But then he describes the king in a fantastically beautiful way, which is a little bit like, all right, George, that's not fair. You can't be like, if only I was good enough to describe him. Also, here's some beautiful use of the English language that you wouldn't be able to do yourself. Yep. You have it in front of you, I think. Do you want to read what he says?
Yeah, let's start
with the gentle blue eyes.
Well, so it's actually the first glimpse of shining armor that I want to start with.
Oh, go back. Yeah, let's do that.
This part of the garden lay on the slope of the hill and allowed a full view of the country below. So she shaded her eyes with her hand and looked far away to catch the first glimpse of shining armor. So to me, it's that initial glimpse, the reflection of light, that gives us just a hint, and then it builds.
There's a crescendo here.
Yeah. And she's also talking about a little troop. There are words glittering around the shoulder of a hill. Even the mixing of kind of anatomy with a description of the landscape. Mm-hmm. You're now comparing shoulders to hills and mountains, and it, I think, has this subconscious effect of making the king seem larger and larger.
Which he certainly is in Irene's opinion and
Right.
perspective.
And I think that's the brilliance of it, is that we're now picturing the king as if we were little children, which if you really think about it, my parents seemed so much bigger when I was little, and there's something magical about that.
Yeah, certainly there is.
When I pick my son up and I gently toss him up in the air and catch him and toss him and catch
I've seen
him.
you launch that dude.
Yeah,
You let's go.
Well, I've been lifting. When I do that, he gets this just hilarious grin on his face and he cackles. And I thought, why is that so funny? And then I also kind of wish that I could be tossed in the air like that and caught safely over and over again. Because that used to happen, and it probably was really fun and hilarious. And I would probably have the same reaction if someone 6 times my size tossed me up in the air.
And you know that you're safe while it's happening.
Right. Yeah. You have nothing but trust because everything has gone well so far. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, this goes on to that particular line that I mentioned. And here's what MacDonald says. I wish I could describe the king so that you could see him in your mind. He had gentle blue eyes, but a nose that made him look like an eagle. A long, dark beard, streaked with silvery lines, flowed from his mouth almost to his waist. And as Irene sat on the saddle and hid her glad face upon his bosom, it mingled with the golden hair which her mother had given her, and the two together were like a cloud with streaks of the sun woven through it. What do you mean you can't describe what it looked like? Come on, MacDonald. Like, this is great. That's awesome.
Good try.
So a little humble brag there from George MacDonald.
And a little bit before that, can I take? There's one other part.
We should have planned this beforehand, but absolutely, let's do it.
We're just geeking out about it. He rode a white horse and was taller than any of the men with him. He wore a narrow circle of gold set with jewels around his helmet. And as he came still near, Irene could discern the flashing of the stones in the sun. That to me is just beautiful. Beautiful to hear him described. You're getting these details that you can see from a distance, and then as he gets closer, you get the part that you're describing too.
Yeah. The conversation then begins after they've had their meal together, and he asks Irene what they're going to do next, and then Irene turns to her father and asks the question she's been thinking for these weeks that have passed, and says, "Tell me about my great grandmother." And the conversation is interesting because the king is not overly concerned or kind of hush-hush about all of it.
He's just very serious.
But he becomes quite grave and serious, and it's unclear how much he knows at this point.
And I think that's intentional. It's definitely on purpose. He looks grave, and he asks what she means, but he doesn't give a ton away.
And he doesn't deny it.
We're supposed to not know, but Irene's also supposed to not quite know what he knows.
After the conversation ends, the two of them head outside. One more sentence I just would like to read here describing the garden and the outside of the palace. Sounds like this. Here's what MacDonald writes. Tufts of heather grew upon them, and other hardy mountain plants and flowers, while near them would be lovely roses and lilies, and all pleasant garden flowers. He's talking about these rocks that they're going to sit on, actually. This mingling of the wild mountain with the civilized garden was very quaint, and it was impossible for any number of gardeners to make such a garden look formal and stiff. I mean, that is enchantment right there. It's impossible, no matter how much you try, to make this garden civilized. There's something about it that is just enchanted, magical. Love this.
Yeah. And it's a great setting for the conversation that resumes, or it's a new topic now.
Yes.
And the king, he mentions to Irene, he says, "You were out late one evening." And this is brilliant. It's a different setting. It's a different feel. And it's time for a different mode of communicating. Now he's much more serious.
So let's move on to chapter 11 now, the old lady's bedroom. A couple of months have passed now.
An entire season is gone. Autumn came and went.
It's here, and Irene pricks her thumb on a brooch. She has I guess, a lady in waiting who decides, oh, Irene's a little bored. Let me just dump out a bunch of non-toys for for her to play with.
There's
that have
there's an
needles.
entire staff at this house, and Irene has gone from each group.
They're kind of passing her off.
Yeah, and everybody has a different idea of how to entertain her or what to do with her. And this most recent one is a bunch of old stuff in a box poured out, and then she pricks her finger.
Which does work with children very often.
Right. You just
Dump
gotta
a bunch
take
of stuff out for 'em.
You have to take the needles out.
You always got to double check for the needles. That was the mistake we get from.
And I think Lewis built on this influence and started putting disclaimers in the actual story itself.
Yes.
Don't lock yourself in a wardrobe.
What McDonald was simply just reminding, hey, don't do this. But if he really wanted to do it the right way, he would have paused the entire book
Break the fourth wall.
and said, do not give needles to children.
Yeah. Even a footnote would do it.
We might be at the very end. Who knows? Maybe it's one of those kind of like an end note instead of a footnote.
Author's note.
Yeah. Oh, there's no. Please don't let your kids play with needles as they attempt to get excited about recreating the scenes from the book.
Yeah.
Well,
So it does seem serious though, because she pricks her finger. It's not just like a little bit of blood.
Yeah.
It swells up.
she's got something.
Yeah. There's some.
It's infected.
Yeah. There's a problem here.
It was a rusty needle of some kind.
Tetanus.
And the tetanus is setting in. We shouldn't joke about that. And she's having a hard time sleeping at night, and she can't figure out exactly what to do. And seeing the moonlight coming down from the old staircase, she decides to follow it up. And there, when she ascends to the top, she comes across the old lady once more, her great, 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 great grandmother.
And her thinking as she begins to seek out her grandmother is that if she was dreaming when she first met her, then she'll meet her again because she thinks she's dreaming now.
Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever actively known you're dreaming in a dream?
Yes. Lucid dreaming.
Yeah, I've never happened to me.
Really?
People have talked about it before. I'm like, that sounds awesome. No, I've got nothing.
Yeah. It's happened a few times. The really, you know you're tired when this happens. The really strange one was when I realized I was dreaming and I woke up. And then I realized I was dreaming and I woke up again.
Oh,
I was
that's
two
like
level-
right
I
out
was-
of a movie.
Yeah, I was 2 levels in. Leonardo was there.
I wasn't even thinking about that one. I just meant like a...
The other Ninja Turtles were there.
So we get up to grandmother Irene's room, and she is spinning. And, we often come across spinning in fairy tales. And I was coming up with just a list off the top of my head before diving deeper into this idea. And I came across quite a few of them. You had mentioned before we were recording about the Fates in Greco-Roman mythology. You're a big fan of Hades Town as well, too.
I am,
right?
yes.
I thought of the Brothers Grimm. You've got the Three Spinners. You have Rumpelstiltskin. You also get in the Perrault fairy tale Sleeping Beauty. And so there's quite a few fairy tales, again, that we can just kind of pull out of our, imaginations and our cultural kind of stories and be like, oh, stories that have spinning in them. And I thought this was a really interesting thing. And I have not looked any more into it. Usually I've maybe done some more, but I legitimately, as we were preparing for this, just about 30 minutes or so before you came over here, I'm reading through it one final time. I was like, oh, that's really unique that appears, because in most of these stories, there's some form of trickery or some problematic element that is occurring with the spinning. It could be as serious as the Fates and literal life and death. Mm-hmm. You think about Rumpelstiltskin and the Brothers Grimm, where he is taking, it's like straw, I think, that he's turning into gold, but he gets the firstborn child. I haven't read it in a long time. Are you familiar with Rumpelstiltskin?
Yes.
Okay. Am I right? Is that correct, the way it goes?
That I hadn't thought of it for a long time, but I think you're onto something with that.
And what I find to be intriguing here, despite the fact that I don't have much more to offer yet, just maybe next time we'll get to it, is that there is a sense of kind of cultural baggage that I'm bringing to this reading, where I'm almost expecting something to go wrong here.
Hmm.
And not just because there's spinning involved, but also because the relationship between the two Irenes here is so wholesome that it feels as if something bad is about to happen.
This is kind of the theme for the past 3 chapters that we just read, is that we are braced for something because we're viewing this from a modern or postmodern perspective.
Yeah. Well, because she even says some creepy stuff here. She's spinning. She says, "What do you think I'm spinning?" And you could read this. She's not saying it this way. But you might be tempted to read it as a, "What do you think I'm spinning?" kind of thing, like almost like a threat. And then we learn that she's spinning spider webs that her pigeons bring to her from over the sea.
Yeah, and that's strange.
Yeah, and Irene's
It's
like,
not normal.
Princess Irene's like, "Oh, that's cool. All right, cool. Thanks for sharing that with me." And she does not reveal the purpose of the webs.
Right.
Again, reading this outside of McDonald's context, you would assume that there is some kind of dread. This feels like the beginning of a horror movie when it's really just atmospheric and the scary parts haven't kicked in yet, but it's supposed to just feel creepy. And obviously, it really doesn't feel creepy here. But those kind of touch points are there in the narrative that I feel obligated to recognize, even unconsciously so.
And I'm curious what it would have been like for an audience, say, 100 years ago or 120 years ago. Very different time. You have a different set of influences. There aren't as many works to read. The genres haven't split as much as they have now, where you have everything being mixed together and influencing each other.
Yeah, there's not as much kind of meta narrative running between all these things where everything's a story about itself,
right?
In a way. They head over to grandmother Irene's bedroom, which is across the landing, and there's a really interesting thing that happens here. We're told that it's the loveliest, most beautiful room that Irene has ever seen, and the old woman here, the grandmother, helps Irene's thumb. She heals it. Pretty much, it's healed just about immediately in this moment. And as Irene is looking around, she realizes there's this kind of weird lamp hanging from the room, and that this lamp doesn't go out, is what she learns. And then grandmother Irene turns to her and says something along the lines of, "Well, if the light ever went out, the room would just look like a empty attic room." Again, that's weird.
Yeah. Some kind of projector system. Miniature solar system. I also love that she has an oval bed.
She has an oval bed.
I would fall out of that so many times.
At this point, Phil, do you think that our grandmother character has kind of a fairy godmother presence to her?
It definitely seems like there's so many magical elements. She appears, she disappears. She gives hints as to what other people might be able to see. She shows extensive knowledge that other people don't seem to have access to. And then she's also doing something very odd and magical in that she is assembling spiderwebs from across the sea.
And healing thumbs.
And healing people's thumbs with magical ointment.
In their conversations, too, she seems to be inviting Irene deeper into the mysteries. She has that interesting line that she gives right at the beginning when they first, kind of catch back up. And she tells Irene, "You would have found me sooner if you hadn't come to think that I was a dream." She then, as she's asking all these things, she kind of refuses to just give Irene any answers completely. She wants her to kind of guess. And even as Irene, earlier in their conversation, is asking about Ludi, she says, Ludi wouldn't be able to, even if she saw me here, she wouldn't believe it. She would just tell herself that isn't what she's looking at, right? She said she would rub her eyes, go away, say that she felt quite queer, and forget half of it and more, and then say it had all been a dream. And Irene realizes, in an ashamed way, oh, wait, that's mostly what I did, too. In all of this, as we're mentioning, the atmosphere is not one of fear. It's not a creepy one. It's not supposed to be abnormal as much as it is supposed to be magical of some kind. It's exciting. It's intriguing. There's like a warmth and invitation into this wonderful mystery, not scary mystery.
Right. I'm going to try a metaphor here, or try a connection to something.
Okay, and I can always edit it out if we don't like it.
That's right. Yeah, so if you're hearing this, it means I'm already dead. I have had this experience recently where I will go up to someone and I will say something positive about what I noticed they were doing. It could be a coworker. I could say, you did a really good job with this.
Mm-hmm.
And the first couple of times that I interact with this person, so we've recently hired a lot of new people at work.
Okay.
The first time I do it, it seems like people are braced for something else. They think that there's going to be but we need you to do it this way.
Oh, this is true.
It's happened a lot, especially in closer relationships. I'll try to say something positive and they're really kind of on edge for something. Or if I don't say anything negative, then they add something negative themselves. We're so used to this more modern way of doing stuff. It seems strange to just have the positive part. And I've even seen a most extreme example is in school. We had a teacher say something really positive to a student, and they just were very emotional about it. They broke down in tears and stuff. And I think that there's a lack of just goodness without the counterpoint. And I see that in this work. You and I were both braced this entire chapter for something weird that never happened. And we've both finished the book. We also know...
We know how this ends. Yeah, we've both read this book all the way through.
Right. We know that there's not anything coming. And you still can't help but look for it. Like, is there something that I'm missing here? And I'm curious if this is it a product of its time? Is George MacDonald unique? If we looked at other books from the same decade, would we see things like this? Or is it because we've read a lot of stuff that's been published in the past 50 years and we're
just a sense of dread through so
yeah,
many
we're just
things.
used to something good happens, something bad's about to happen. Almost every time something's going really well in a movie or a TV show now, I'm just braced because you know that that's when they get you with the twist.
Yeah. This will be an interesting thing for us to think through as we go through this book, obviously much slower than we have previously when we've read it. And I think something that as you and I read more George MacDonald, I actually have a collection of his fairy tales arriving later this week, which I'm excited to dive into to get a better sense of, because I'll acknowledge that most of my knowledge of Victorian literature is literally just Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. I was trying to make a list of books that I had read from this time period. And there's some Gothic literature in there as well too, and a couple of other smaller things, but it is mostly Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
And so as I'm thinking through, is this normal for this time period or not? I'm realizing the thing I'm actually asking is this like Charles Dickens? you know, which is different than when you and I were reading Lewis, and we're very familiar with books written in the 40s and the 50s and 60s because a lot of books that we read are from that time period.
A lot of the books in school were from that time period.
Sure, absolutely too. So let's go on here now to the last chapter, this very short chapter. There's not really much to say in chapter 12, this short chapter about Curdy. We really just get a paragraph or two about how awesome and wonderful and selfless his mother is.
Such a nice, good mother! !
That's true. Such a nice, good mother. And she was, I love this, all mothers are more or less, but Mrs. Peterson was nice and good all more and no less.
Yeah.
She made a little heaven in that poor cottage on the hillside for her husband and son to go home to out of the dreary earth in which they worked. I doubt if the princess was very much happier even in the arms of her huge great-grandmother than Peter and Curdy were in the arms of Mrs. Peterson. True, her hands were hard and chapped and large, but it was with work for them, and therefore in the sight of the angels her hands were so much the more beautiful.
It also talks about how everybody's working hard for each other, but they don't think about that. because it would have ruined it.
Yeah, I love that. That would have spoiled everything.
Yeah.
So I really love this kind of picturesque vision that we're given of this family. We then cut away from that and go to Curdy, who's continuing to work in the mine, and he does some work because again he's trying to get some money to be able to, or not. Yeah, he's buying the petticoat. He's not making it, right?
No, he's trying to buy her a petticoat.
He's trying to buy her a new petticoat, and every night though he's tying a piece of string, kind of like Theseus in the labyrinth, right, to his pickaxe, and then he wanders and he continues to explore the mine, never getting close to being caught, but never actually getting caught, and then following that string back. And every night he gets back, he has a giant,
snarl.
Yes, it's just this ball of string that he asks his mother to help him kind of unfurl.
He doesn't even ask. He just comes
Oh, it
back.
just happens. You're right.
He doesn't have enough time before he falls asleep to do it. But when he wakes up, even if it's been a short sleep, he sees that she's already untangled it. He can't figure out how she does it.
Yeah.
And she explains it.
I can't think how you do it, Mother, he would say. I follow the thread, she would answer, just as you do in the mine. And that's all we get. That's where the chapter ends.
And I'm so curious how that comes into play later, because we've both read through it, but I can't remember.
Oh, really?
How that comes into play.
This is some great foreshadowing, not just for Curdy, but for Irene as well too, and the role. Oh, I can't wait till we uncover this in just a few. Really, just a few episodes we'll be able to talk about this. The role that strings and threads play here,
right, in
this, which is again why I'm excited to talk more about spinsters. And which I guess that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I meant spinning, but I guess Grandma Irene is.
That's another word that we're viewing from a more modern time.
Well, Phil, before we go, we have a first in the listener feedback section.
We have real physical mail.
I have a gift to give you that does not come from me, but comes from one of our patron supporters, Andrew Trophy. I'm going to hand this to you, and then I'm going to actually read the email. But please open it into the microphone so we can hear the crinkle of the
little
package.
ASMR packaging.
So I'm going to go ahead and read this. And the reason I'm going to read it is because it's definitely for Phil. It was not a gift for me. I'm still waiting on my own gifts. But other than that, it's okay. So here's the email that we got from Andrew Trophy, one of our longtime supporters on Patreon. He says, this is actually not, he doesn't say Daniel and Phil, it's just for Phil. You mentioned something on a podcast, probably The Dancing Lawn, a little while ago, so I ordered you a present. By the way, I've been reading the series and listening to the podcast again with my 13-year-old son on and off for about a year now. We're into The Magician's Nephew, and I just had to tell you that he was very disappointed when we got to the point where there were no wolves in the rest of the series. He had really, really enjoyed hearing Daniel say wolf. I know you're better now, but thanks for the little gem. You're better now. That's like, I know you've been fixed. Blessings on both of your families, Ander. And then he says, P.S. It was great to hear you guys mangle my name the first few times it was on the podcast. I wouldn't have had it any other way. Don't worry, you've settled into the correct pronunciation.
Oh, I'm so relieved to hear that.
Right, yes.
Because I picked one and I went for it.
So, so Phil got a gift and I got better. Phil, what are you holding in your hand there?
I have the biggest smile on my face. This is a TV Be Gone.
TV Be Gone.
It is a small.
It's a hammer.
it's a small, high-powered universal remote that will turn off TVs.
So for those of our supporters, or those of our listeners who are not supporters and they don't listen to The Dancing Lawn, why have you received this gift?
So I might be a little bit off. I think this is because we may have been talking about how annoying TVs are and how when a group is in a restaurant, you want to be able to turn the TVs off. Or I may have mentioned how at the gym, no one's actually watching the TVs. We just want them all to.
I think it was in the gym that this happened. We were talking about the gym.
This is a common theme in my life. Just everyone's distracted by the TV. It's not actually showing anything they want to see. They just want the TVs to be off. So my dream has always been to have one of these so that I can just very discreetly.
What does it do, by the way?
You push a button and it just blasts the turn off signal that a remote would have in as many different ways. It kind of cycles through. You hold it for a few minutes and it just cycles through all the off codes and keeps sending it out, and you try to turn off as many TVs as you can.
Can we try this sometime soon?
Wait, yes, I would
We
love
gotta
to.
go to a place. Like, I don't like. We're kind of too old to be pranking people. It's
Well, speak for yourself.
30-some guys like being like, we're gonna get the people. We'll turn the TV off at the bar. But you buy this, you hold it down, it turns the TVs off. And is this legal? There's no way this is legal, right?
Well, it has a disclaimer here on the back. It says this product is sold for the exclusive private use of the buyer on their own equipment. Used under adult supervision, which I usually have. For external use only, side effects.
Your dad listens to the podcast, so he'll let us know if you're allowed to do this or not.
Yeah, he's coming up soon. And both my parents are. Side effects may include decreased anxiety, increased social skills, increased cognitive ability, increased sense of well-being. The above statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. Effective personal choices are the sole responsibility of each individual user of this device.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should definitely test it out at some point. We won't do that right now, but because obviously we're supposed to go to bed.
We have very delicate recording equipment. We don't want to.
Oh, could it actually turn the recording equipment off? Oh, I was like, I didn't realize that. That's how little I know about technology. I'm like, yo, sure. If you told me that it would do that, I would 100% believe you. Well, this is
Andrew,
great.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the gift.
That was a real
fun.
bright spot.
I actually got to go back to the P.O. box. We've got something else there. I just got a message that someone else has sent another thing to us.
Yeah.
Hey, we love stuff like this. Is great.
I got a personal message to my personal email from one of the Pints of Jack's guys.
I did not. So thanks, David, Matt, and
Yeah,
Andrew.
I forwarded it to Daniel just to brag.
The email that you forwarded me was, hey, you got this too, right? And I was like, nope, I did not. So thanks a lot. All right. Before we go, we always want to thank our patrons, including Ander, who make this show possible over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can listen to a bonus episode each month where Phil complains about the TVs in the gym. Like, if you were wondering, what do these guys talk about? At some point in the last few months, Phil complained about television. You know what we did do?
Who says complaining doesn't pay?
That's true.
Did you get a keychain?
I did not.
Yeah, that's right.
No, there we go. So if you want to head over there, $2 a month will get you Phil's complaints. Special thanks goes to John Marr, Emily Wakefield, Ryan Smith, Andrew Trophy, Becca Brown, and Christiana Line for supporting us at our top tiers. If you have any listener feedback, you can always email us at hello@lamppostlistener.com. You can call us at 406-646-6733. You can also send us a little present, just like Ander has done, at our P.O. box, which we have linked in the episode's description.
Daniel likes Star Wars and 20-sided die.
No, I'm not a Dungeons and Dragons guy. I do like board games a lot.
He likes 6-sided die.
But a normal 6-sided die is all I need. I'm not a D&D guy.
Maybe like a Monopoly light side.
I don't like Monopoly either. I'm not. I actually passionately. I really am. I will be very condescending when someone's like, "Hey, you want to play a board game?" They're like, "I got Chutes and Ladders" or something like something like that. I'm like, if you can buy it at Target, that's actually not true. Target actually has a decent.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
they have too much to offer.
Selection, but it's like if you can buy it at Kohl's, I don't want to play it.
Oh, that's good.
The little kid section at the back of Kohl's or like Macy's or something. I don't want to play it, including Monopoly. I hope that I would love for my son. Here's a hot take. I would love for my son to leave this house.
Don't say something you can't take back.
When he's 18
Monopoly.
years old. No.
Oh, no.
Having never played Monopoly in our home.
Yeah, that's probably going to happen.
I don't think he'd be missing out on anything.
I thought I played Monopoly all the time growing up. I think it was 3 times.
I had Monopoly on our not Gateway. Was Gateway a type of computer? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There were on our Gateway.
It came with a gallon of milk.
Oh, because the cow one. Yeah. So our Gateway desktop, before you called it a desktop, because the only computers you had.
Yeah.
That ran
the family computer.
Yeah, the family computer ran like Windows 98, and we had a Monopoly game, it was Star Wars Monopoly on CD-ROM.
Wait, you had that too?
Yeah, did you have it too? Yeah,
oh,
dude,
man,
it was
I
awesome.
love that thing.
It was so
I
great.
love playing as Boba Fett because he would jet back 2 spaces ahead.
So
I did play a lot, but it was Star Wars computer Monopoly.
I also had I actually have never played real Monopoly. I don't think. I think I've only played like so and so Monopoly.
Yeah.
And even then, it's not from. I don't get the appeal. All right, we have long overstayed our welcome here with this episode, Phil. I do have to finish, actually. I just realized I did not finish our little end credits here. You can always head over to lamppostlistener.com to find links to previous episodes, book information, everything else we've got going on there. As always, we'd appreciate a review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast, because it helps other listeners find the show and join through our read-along. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we'll be back soon.
See you.